Hello everyone, my name is Jerrel. I'm a normal human being just like you, and I'm a game developer. I run my own studio, I make commercial and homebrew games. And today I want to discuss an analysis of the trailer for the new Zelda game. I find this very exciting, and one of my favorite parts is how they framed it as if it would be a 2D Link adventure, which is already quite exciting for many people because it was starting to feel like maybe we would not get any more 2D Zelda games. But once it hits the 45-second mark and you see that Link is gone from the adventure and that Zelda takes center stage, I think that is where it gets very exciting. Now, for me personally, I'm very excited. This is the Zelda game that I feel the most excited for over the past few years. In this video, I want to discuss some interesting aspects from the trailer that I've noticed from a game developer standpoint. There's going to be countless people all over the internet analyzing this in terms of, callbacks and sort of Easter eggs, but that's not what I'll be doing. I will be approaching this as a game developer and just picking out some things that I think are interesting and that are details that Nintendo did not really explain, but you can see them in the video here. So what I think is really neat is the blue cape that Link is wearing at the beginning in this prologue here. It appears Zelda wears that after the prologue ends. Zelda wears her royal attire in the prologue. After she escapes, there are clearly some setup events, and after that, she is wearing the same cape as Link. Now, Link does throw this cape off at this point here, which I think is fun. He sort of heroically reveals himself, which I think will be neat if we get to the end of the adventure and the tables have turned and Link is the one that is, sort of stuck in the crystal, and then Zelda at the end of the game throws off her blue cape heroically and faces off the final battle. And I think that would be just poetic and great, because we've had decades of this scene playing out over and over again, and I think it would be great if Zelda gets her chance to do that. Now, this is a kind of game that we've been dreaming of for years, where Zelda gets to be the main playable character, so I'm very much looking forward to that. So I want to discuss a few things. For example, the sections with Link are so interesting, and I'm not exactly sure what they want to tell us, because there's two options here. Either this is going to be cutscene only, or there's a pretty decent chance that we'll get to play through the prologue as Link. And if that is true, that means that they would have to have programmed an entire portion of the engine for Link-centric combat, which means there's a very good chance that there will be secondary game modes that have multiplayer aspects. There could be an aspect of perhaps there's a set of dungeons or challenges or bosses that you could face where one player plays as Zelda and the other plays as Link. I think that's highly likely considering what we see from this scene here. Again, this could be entirely scripted, but from what I see here, I just get the feeling that there is gameplay logic here for all that. So, after Zelda is through the prologue, she no longer has her royal attire, some set of events occurs, and she has her adventurer's tunic, her adventurer's outfit, which I really like this design. What I love about this is that it's simple, and it approaches Zelda's design as if she were a protagonist designed in the 80s or 90s. And what I mean by that is there's a very specific design philosophy from the 80s and 90s, is that your characters had to have very specific, obvious shapes so that they could be designed and expressed clearly in the low-resolution platforms at the time. The sprites on the Super Nintendo, for example, characters had to have very defined shapes, so you can clearly see the character, you can express their movement. And this is designed with that mentality in mind, in that it isn't overly complicated. Modern character designs, if you have a look at them, because we have such high-resolution gaming consoles now, modern character designs, particularly from the AAA studio, tend to be very messy. and to me, I think they're sloppy, and they don't do a good job communicating the characters. So I can really appreciate the character design here. It's simple, it's extremely effective, it's charming, it's got a lot of charisma to it, and to me, it's a perfect outfit for Zelda, except for the fact that I think the blue clashes too much with the lighter portions of her color scheme in certain lighting. When the lighting gets dark, the blue cape actually catches it expresses significantly less light, so it actually overpowers her character's color dynamic in certain scenes. Like for example, this here, she really falls into the background a little bit. So I'm not sure if they're going to continue adjusting the shader on that. Maybe make it a little bit more reflective and have it catch more light. Not reflective, specular. So it's maybe you couldn't add trim to it. See, that's if you add trim to that design, you're like, oh, Link has that yellow trim along his hood or whatever, his hat or whatever. That muddies design to an extent, particularly with the aesthetic they're going for. So the most important thing that I've noticed, I've rambled a little bit, again, as a developer, I'm hugely invested in character design. So what I find most interesting is the energy system. There is no magic meter, but what I notice is the character Tri has a number of triangles trailing behind him, and that indicates the number of items that you can build at one time. So you can see here, he has 4 triangles floating behind him, and if you have a look up top, you'll be able to see that the table requires 1 energy. So you could build 4 tables, 4 beds, but the enemies take up more if you create an echo of an enemy. So after Zelda picks that up, you'll see that it takes up 2. So Zelda summons that and he only has 2 energy left, and once he has 2 out, he has no more left. So that is an indicator of how much energy you have left in order to create your echoes. I really prefer this method of organic in-world magic meter as opposed to having it on the heads-up display. We're in an era of gaming where we now have the resolution and we have the capabilities in terms of our hardware to be able to express that sort of thing in interesting and creative ways. And I think it's important to do that and to take things out of the heads-up display and implement them in the game world that is more interesting. I want to offer my analysis here. Something that I find interesting is that Zelda and Tri do not cast shadows like everything else in the game. I don't understand the design philosophy behind that. I would assume it's possibly for maybe spacing jumps and placing jumps correctly, but it doesn't. We don't see enough from the trailer to understand how platforming is going to be affected by that. Because if Zelda casted a standard shadow like everyone else when lighting is coming in at an angle, that's going to make it very difficult to place your jumps. So I assume they do that to make it very clear on where your character is going to land their jumps. But I think it looks very strange. I think there's a point earlier in the video here. See, here's a point where she does not. So I would say this is not a playable segment. This is cinematic only. But if we move ahead more, there's a particular scene where she's leaving town. Here I find it a little jarring that Zelda and Tri do not cast normal, realistic shadows while everyone else does. And I just find that interesting. So I assume that, I'll touch on this more later, but I assume there's going to be significant platforming, and part of that, I believe, you will have access to more items. And let me expand on that further. But before I do that, I want to point out how interesting it is that the energy counter, or the triangles following Tri, are not triangles. The shadows they cast are little circles, which it's cute. I think it's visually cohesive. I think the reason why they did that is because they don't want the shadows to look messy as well, and this is a very clear indicator of the energy you have in the cast, shadow being cast. So the reason why I'm certain you get far more items than just the Tri-Rod is the heads-up display on the top left here. You can see that the tri-rod seems to be equipped to the D-pad right, whereas we have spaces on up, down, and left, and they are open. And there's no reason why you would have this indicator there and only have the tri-rod if the tri-rod was the only item you have. And I have a very strong feeling that you do have access to other items, because there are portions of the trailer where the heads-up display is entirely hidden, even though they are gameplay segments. If we move ahead in the trailer, for example, this portion here, the heads-up display is entirely hidden. And the reason, I believe, the reason why they would have done this is because these levels take place significantly later in the game, where there are other items, and Zelda has more hearts, and maybe there's more to the heads-up display on the top right, and Nintendo does not want to spoil that, so they have run a build of the game where they've hidden the heads-up display just so we don't see all of that stuff. This trailer wants us to focus specifically on the tri-rod, and the trailer does not want us to know what other things are in the inventory, as I'm sure they'll want to introduce those concepts to us later on, in later trailers. So I just adore this beautiful aesthetic they've chosen for this. This has a hand-painted feeling, which is, it feels like 2D art, and it feels like it was hand-drawn, and it sort of channels the energy of the 2D art that we used to get on the 16-bit era of Zelda games. So, something I notice is that when it comes to the tri-rod, it looks like you can only equip one item at the time. And this is also part of what convinces me that there are going to be significantly more items for Zelda to collect, is that combat would be extremely clunky if your only option was to use the tri-rod and you only had one action button for combat. That would be very clunky. That would mean that you're constantly opening and closing the menu to select different echoes to generate. And that, can you imagine playing through something like Ocarina of Time and only being able to equip one item? Can you imagine having to go into the menu every couple seconds during combat to select a different item? It would have very poor flow. So I'm convinced that the tri-rod is not her only item, and that they're just focusing on that because that's the key item here. It's the most interesting part of the game here. So we could see things like potions and whatever, key items, letters that you give to people. Let's see. Yeah, I noticed that the max energy for Tri, the little guy there, I have a strong feeling that you will be able to increase the maximum number of triangles, which would increase the maximum energy you have and allow you to create more items. And now the reason I believe that is because this first scene where Zelda encounters Tri only has the 3 triangles, but as she's leaving the castle, Tri has 4 triangles. You can see here Tri only has 3 triangles there, which means Zelda could only create 3 tables, but every other scene we see, Tri has 4. So I have a strong feeling, in many ways, that similar to how Link is able to increase his magic meter and cast more magic, I believe that in this, as you continue through the adventure, you'll be able to increase your maximum energy, and you'll be able to create more echoes simultaneously. What I'm interested in is what happens when you try to create a new item. Does it remove the first item that you've created when you've already expended your triangle energy? So, from a developer standpoint, I have some performance concerns due to this, the visual effect here, the image effect, which creates a sense of depth of field, and that is what makes things look a little blurry in the background. So we've seen this in Link's Awakening remake, and it caused significant performance implications. It caused slowdown in portions of the games that otherwise would not have had slowdown. And it is not as aggressive in this game. According to these trailers, it's being used less as trying to make it look like a cute diorama, and it's being used more to express a sense of depth and size in the world. And that is something that is quite difficult to do from this perspective. When you have the camera facing down like that, it tends to make the world feel a little small because the player cannot just look out to the horizon, which is something that we're accustomed to doing in modern games. So I believe that the way that they're using it in this way is tasteful, and that it's not necessarily impeding with the gameplay and the visual information. But I am concerned that it is going to cause performance implications, because that, combined with the particle effects and the weather effects, are... I noticed some scenes chug a little bit here. And in any console, these days, it's not exactly the poly count that causes a bottleneck. It's really having to draw transparent pixels. So say, for example, you can see the wind blowing here, and in other scenes you have the water, you have rainfall. These scenes I can see are chugging. They're quite choppy already. It is a combination of having to render that depth of field effect where it's blurred out there. You have a sense of fog, you have the rain, and then once you're in combat, things get quite sluggish. You can see there's these neat firework effects, but any console, these are the things that tend to cause the most performance implications, because these are things that tend to stockpile up. When you're in combat, if you hit a bunch of enemies at a time, you'll get many transparent pixels. And when you have certain shaders that, say, for example, they have to perform certain math functions, they perform those math functions for every single transparent pixel. And the more transparent pixels, the more that they're calculating those. And they all add up. And it feels like there's going to be some performance implications because of that. And I'm really hoping that the team finds a way to optimize that, so we don't have... I just have this feeling that we're going to see reviewers online just nitpicking about, instead of talking about the great things about what they've achieved in this game, they're just going to complain about, oh, this game, they should have put it on the Switch too. Why did they put it on the old Switch? Look, old Switch is so weak. Because we've seen that time and time again, and I have concerns that people are not going to appreciate the game for what it is, because they're going to focus on something like performance issues. So, something I noticed is that the game doesn't use cell shading or toon shading, which seems like a decision they would have used in the past. I really like the decision that they've chosen here. They're sort of sticking with... it's different from Link's Awakening Remake. I was a little concerned that it would be toy-like, like the Link's Awakening Remake, but this seems to be taking a step back from that and taking itself a little more seriously in terms of the context in which it's presenting itself. We get to lean into the normal mapping and the specular mapping, and something I notice is the game tends to look very shiny. Things tend to look quite wet, and I believe the reason they do that is because they want the visuals to really pop. If they didn't do that, the visuals would actually look quite flat. I'm hoping in the future we find a way to express that sort of depth and visual vibrance without having to make things look so wet and shiny. The reason why we do that, and I do that in my games as well, is because back when we do 2D games, I say back, but we don't really see many 2D games from AAA industry anymore. But when art is hand-drawn, especially with the 2D, you get to explicitly control the exact expression visually of your visuals. You get to make things pop by just drawing, your shadows and your lighting there. But in a 3D engine, where lighting is real-time, it's unpredictable, and you aren't able to clearly express that sort of depth exactly. It's basically up to the engine to calculate all sorts of different values. And so really, to get things to pop, you kind of have to make them shiny to get them to visually pop, which is why even, many games in 3D, they tend to look a little too shiny, but that's because if you don't do that, the visuals tend to look very flat. So let's see if I had any other notes to discuss here. Yeah. One last thing I want to point out. I think it's very cute that the energy meter and the energy source is a triangle. Uh, and I feel that it is a nod to how 3D models are constructed of polygons or triangles, and that what the player is doing is generating a 3D model, and the 3D model is made of triangles, so you're using triangles to generate it. I think that's quite neat. I really like that. So that's quite exciting. I'm very much looking forward to this, but unfortunately, I haven't even had the chance to play Link's Awakening's remake. I've only got to hear about other people talking about that. I develop my own games full time. I run my own studio, and because I work alone, it means that I have to put an immense amount of hours working. So I'm a little bit behind, and I'm worried that I'm not going to get to play this game when it launches. I didn't get to play Link's Awakening, and Link's Awakening is my favorite Zelda. But I have a feeling that if I play this, this may be one of my favorite Zeldas, because I really appreciate the ingenuity, the creativity that's going on here. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing more trailers from Nintendo. Did you notice anything in the trailers that's different to what I noticed? If you found anything else that's interesting, I'd love to hear from you. If you found this stuff interesting, let me know. And please like or subscribe if you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff. Comment if you want to see me cover more. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care of yourselves. And bye.